the love that God has for you to grow is going to trump all your fears if you allow it. And I can't say it's easy, but I can tell you that it's worth it. If you are a female Christian entrepreneur or life coach, you need a podcast. And if you have a podcast, you need a podcast coach. Finding a supportive and empowering community is key to podcaster success. Through my holistic approach as a trained life coach and my experience in the podcast industry since 2016, I want to encourage you weekly through answering your podcasting questions. I'm cheering for you, and your voice matters. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Holistic Podcasting. Today we are going to be talking about the capacity lid and how it's going to affect you as a podcaster if we don't stop and think about it. All right, so do you ever look back and think to yourself, whoa, I have some major themes or repeated storylines in my life? I do. And I want to share it with you because I believe this is going to help you. Throughout my adult life, I've come to see a familiar storyline. At 42, these themes are pretty consistent, and I want to share them with you. So I will go about my life, and bam, it'll just hit me. I get overwhelmed. I get filled with anxiety. I feel all sorts of stress. Physically, it starts to show up in my life like sickness or autoimmune flare-ups, or physically I'm in pain, or I'm really tired and exhausted. And emotionally, I may start to shut down. I'll get real quiet, even quieter than normal. I will really start to go inward, and it will be really tough for me to figure out really what's going on in my heart. Spiritually, it starts to show up like I'm striving, or I'm begging, or coming from a place of lack, and I forget who I am in Jesus. Mentally, I begin to say, maybe subconsciously, it's too much. And so this is what I want to share with you, that I noticed this when I first became a mom. I noticed it when I started studying to become a personal trainer through one of the hardest certifications you can get, called ACSM. I noticed the same storyline when I found out that I was pregnant with the twins, and I certainly said it as a mom of 4 littles, especially with one who had higher needs that we really could not find any answers from books or experts. I definitely said it when our marriage came out of this 10-year slumber of just get by coma, and we both had to work on some stuff to make our marriage thrive. I definitely said this, it's too much, when I started working for Rebel Parenting as a producer because I had no idea what I was doing. I definitely said this, it's too much. I have a fear of capacity level, right? When I started my own podcast, and that's why I'm sharing this today. But I want to give you some more examples. I said it when I started my podcast business and started my coaching certification. Every time I have had the same story of it's too much. I have too much on my plate. I have become very familiar with this common story of the fear of capacity. And each time I will say I have grown, but I want to share one that just happened a couple months ago. And it was a very real moment for me. And I call it my oh crap moment. I woke up one morning intensely feeling the weight and the overwhelm of building my business and my podcast and helping others build and grow their podcast. I knew that God had called me into this space. So it wasn't that I was doubting what he was calling me to, but I was freaked out, y'all. I woke up that morning intensely feeling the same story, hearing this story in my mind. And I sat down for my time with Jesus, and this picture instantly popped into my head of Peter stepping out of the boat. And thinking about Peter, he was so excited. He was so ready. He was gung-ho. I mean, he literally was like, I'm getting in with Jesus. I want to walk on the water like Jesus did. And he just went for it. And he got out of the boat. And then there was a split second. And this is what Jesus was showing me, where I was at. It was a moment of, oh, crap. The moment where Peter looks down at his feet on top of the water, defying all odds, experiencing this complete miracle, and fear, just like that. Boom. Oh, crap. The fear of capacity. Peter reacted to his fear saying, this isn't possible. This is impossible for me to be walking on this water. And that's where I found myself. In that moment of Peter. Like slow-mo time. If you can imagine that. Literally, that's what I was thinking in that of like, I am in that split second between this is so unreal that I'm walking on water and oh crap, I'm walking on water. Maybe you can relate. Have you found yourself feeling that intensity where you're stepping out into faith, into something, and it's that split second of, oh my gosh, what did I do? And so that's what we're talking about today. The other side of this, though, I want to hit on this real quick because I think it's really important too. The other side of this coin is when we cross over to I can do it all mentality. When we overcompensate, our tendency can be to go to taking on way more than is absolutely necessary. And this is where we can find ourselves in even more overwhelm. We can find ourselves resentful. We can find ourselves scared out of our minds, right? If one thing drops, it's all going to poo. So I want you to just think of those two sides of this coin, right? And I want you to think about, why did I tell you this story? Well, I just finished up 9 weeks of a podcast boot camp where I helped guide precious women step by step through the process of launching a podcast. And I can tell you that most of the women in my group, including myself, like I just shared, dealt with this fear of capacity. And what this looks like as a podcaster is, will I have enough time to do a podcast? Am I going to have enough time to create content? It's those kind of questions. They all deal with capacity. What if God doesn't show up? What if I put out my podcast and nothing happens? What if nobody listens? Those are all fear that's driving this conversation of fear of capacity. Our mind begins to go down a path that leads us to stall, to procrastinate, and avoid. And the opportunity to ask ourselves is there, what am I really afraid of? And here you're going to discover that there's a depth of healing that God wants you to do in this space. It's not actually about the fear of capacity. It's about the fear underneath. What could you be afraid of there? Is it a fear of failing? Is it a fear of not doing it perfectly? Is it the fear of the unknown? Maybe you're listening to this podcast today asking the same question. Is this too much? Is this starting a podcast too much for me to add to my plate? And I love what my amazing spiritual mentor says. she says, it's always wise to pause and bring your plate to the Father and surrender. And I love, too, what Jesus says in John 17:4, I have finished the work which you have given me to do. It was the work that God put into Jesus's heart. There was so many other agendas in the group. Like, can you imagine if he did everything that everybody else needed him to do? His day would never be done. And I think what my mentor is saying is when we pause and we come before him and we ask him, what are you calling me to do in this season? Not what my mom thinks I should do, not what my sister or my friend or my kids want me to do, but what is God calling me to do? Even though all of these people around you may have a good word for you, our ultimate person that we get to ask is our Creator. What's on our plate for this season? And for you, if he's calling you to do a podcast, what is he calling you to let go of? What is he calling you to shed off of you? Sometimes it's way bigger than we can actually imagine. Think of how many times in the Bible God used people who didn't think they had the capacity to do something. Moses, he had a huge stuttering problem, right? And he called him to go be the Israelites' rescuer. That's amazing. Think of Gideon and his army. He had a very small army, and yet God chose him to defeat the enemy. Think of David and Goliath. David was this teenage boy who defeated a giant with a rock. That is just so cool to think about. If David was standing in that fear capacity, it's such a game changer, right? If you think about it. What if he was like, I don't know, that's a lot for me to do as a teenager. And sometimes we are the ones standing there saying, I don't know, that's a lot for me as a mom. That's a lot for me as a working mom. But if God has called you to it, he's going to lead you through it. One declaration that I've really clung to as I've really come to understand the importance of declaration, and if you want to find out more of that, please go listen to my other podcast. It's called Holistic Hearts. It's where I really hone in on the power of our words, especially last season. And declaring truth over our mind is so important. That is the renewing of our mind. And the sentence that I've been speaking over myself has been, I have enough time to do what God has called me to do today. Guys, there have been days where my to-do list is overflowing. And when I pause and I ask for help, when I ask what's on my plate for today, what actually matters today, he is so faithful in answering that. Miraculously, there's time that comes into play, like miraculous time of, oh, I'll pick up your kids at sports tonight so you have an extra time, or, oh, there's a surprise hour in my day. It's things like that where when we pause and really just come before him, we speak truth, it will be refreshing and light. And that's where I always say too, is that we can begin to delegate, and it's not only a blessing to us, but we can delegate to others who maybe they can't wait to help you in this capacity, whether it's writing show notes or editing or social media or helping you out with carpool, or you never know, right? So the common theme, even in the midst of every one of those moments that we talked about, is choice and how we see each of these situations. Our mindset has a choice to fall into fear and overwhelm, or to align and breathe deep into God's peace that he has you and me exactly where he wants me to be today. We have today. And thankfully, in my own story, and I know in your story, God has somehow managed to help me break through this limited capacity that I think I'm capable of, and He's been able to take me to the next level. And I believe that that's your word too. He is more than capable of taking you to the next level, to the next step. The love that God has for you to grow is going to trump all your fears if you allow it. And I can't say it's easy, but I can tell you that it's worth it. And each time we choose to trust in His plan, we get the opportunity to grow and expand. And when we learn to let go of this fear of capacity or it's too much, we will begin to be free from that and grow even more than we ever could have thought. I love what my husband had shared with me. I was processing with him a few months ago about the fear of capacity. And I love this illustration. He said, fear of capacity is like working with a floppy disk, but you need to upgrade to a terabyte card. Like the floppy disk is no longer even relevant. And I love that. Like we get to let go of those things that no longer serve us. And I encourage you today to take this upgrade, to let go of that fear of capacity and trust that He has got you, His grace has got you to do what He has called you to do today in this season. And that means for your podcast. And I'm thinking of my management clients, my podcast boot campers, my future boot campers. Know that what He has called us to do is going to require bravery. It's going to require trust that He is in the process of growing us. It's going to require letting go of things that you are no longer called to do. And as you grow as a podcaster and human, you're going to be called to follow Him deeper into your calling. And it's going to require stepping out of that boat and experiencing, even if it's for 2 seconds of a miracle, you've experienced a miracle. And Jesus has your hand holding you up. You don't have to say, oh crap, because Jesus has got you. Either way, you win. If you step out of the boat and you let go of that fear of capacity, you get to walk on water. And if you start to sink, you get to be in the hands of Jesus. So you were courageous when you step out of the boat, you were courageous, while others stay back afraid and they don't push past their own limitations. And that, my friend, is what we're called to do, is to live in the more. So, podcasters, I love you. I pray that you break that capacity lid off right now. And I pray that you live in the freedom of dreaming and vision and in that beautiful 2-second miracle of walking on water. All right. If you would like to find out more, join us inside of our Facebook group and our community, Holistic Podcasting. I would love to see you there. And don't forget to share this with a friend. If you like today's episode, share it and also leave a review down below. If you like today's episode or even the episodes in the past, I'd love to hear from you. It's always fun to read reviews and always really good for people who want to potentially listen to this podcast to see what you're loving on this podcast. So I appreciate you and I hope you have a great day. Hey, thanks for listening today. I hope that you feel encouraged and inspired to launch and grow your podcast. And speaking of that, I want to personally invite you, if you are thinking about starting a podcast or you're thinking about growing your current podcast, I have an amazing opportunity coming up in the middle of April, inviting you into our podcast bootcamp. The first one is for new podcasters who are looking to launch and create their brand new podcast. And the second is going to be for current podcasters who want to grow and monetize their podcast. come check it out at www.kristinfieldschadwick.com, or you can find me on Instagram and send me a message and that you want to know more.